Das MB-Spiel des Monats.
Auf den Boulevards von Paris, da spielen alle Yahtzee. Von Bayern bis Peking, alle schütteln, Würfel rollen. In der Luft und auch auf Hochsee, spielen alle Yahtzee.
Das beliebteste Würfelspiel der Welt von MB.
I was having a tough time last week. I was stressed out, tired, feeling the effects of what may or may not be seasonal depression. And I needed a pick-me-up. I needed something to boost my mood and bring a little sunshine into my life. But instead, I listened to the Apt Pupil audiobook twice, and, well, I'm feeling so much better now. Hi there, I'm your host, Mr. Doyle, and this is a great undertaking. This is the third video in the Different Seasons series. So far, I've discussed the novella Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption, and the movie The Shawshank Redemption. Fun fact, it's not Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption, it's just Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption. There is no the or the, except there is a the in the movie title The Shawshank Redemption. Thanks to Patrick Costin for bringing that to my attention. All right, Apt Pupil. Okay, so not doing a costume this week. There was really only one possible costume that would have made sense for this video, and nope, not doing that. Also, we're going to cover some heavy subject matter in this video that should not be made light of. That's not to say I won't, but it shouldn't be made light of. And finally, in an effort to not get this video yoinked down by YouTube, I'm going to be using the name of a family-friendly dice game, Yahtzee, in place of a word that sounds a lot like Yahtzee. You know the word, starts with an N, ends with an Yahtzee. It's probably the only word that rhymes with Yahtzee. Trotsky. Shoe tree. Snow ski. Anyway, when I say things like the Yahtzee regime or Yahtzee Germany, I'm not pointing an accusatory finger at the folks at Milton Bradley or Hasbro, but rather I'm just trying not to get demonetized or thrown in YouTube jail. And wow, I've already made light of something that absolutely should not ever be made light of, and I haven't even made it beyond the introduction to the video. But frankly, I need to lighten things up a bit for my own sanity at this point, so I apologize in advance for what is about to happen and for the things I'm going to do throughout this video, which will inevitably and inarguably be in poor taste. Yahtzee! Apt Pupil, a brief synopsis. Todd Bowden is an apt pupil. Good grades, good family. A paper route, but he is about to meet a different kind of teacher, Mr. Doosander. Todd knows all about Doosander's dark past, the torture, the death, the decades-old manhunt Doosander has escaped to this day. Yet Todd doesn't want to turn him in. Todd wants to know more, much more, and he is about to learn the real meaning of power and the seductive lure of evil. History and inspiration. Apt Pupil was published in the collection of 4 novellas, Different Seasons, in 1982. In regards to King's inspiration for the story, or what real-life instances may have influenced King while writing Apt Pupil, I can't manage to find any quotes or interviews with King directly stating what caused him to craft this particular tale. Obviously, there are some events from history and the era of World War II that influenced and informed the story, but if there were any specific events that caused King to write Apt Pupil, I'm not sure. However, there are indeed real-life instances and examples of
Yahtzees
fleeing persecution for their involvement in the horrific atrocities they participated in, using fake identities, and those same
Yahtzees
being found out and held to account. But not only did they escape and hide, in some cases, they were granted passage and aided by American intelligence officials. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Yahtzee. Not my greatest title ever. In the story Apt Pupil, Yahtzee war criminal Kurt Dusander has established a secret identity. He goes by the name Arthur Denker, and he has rewritten his entire history in order to maintain his cover story and remain off the radar of the authorities. He lives a quiet yet comfortable life, one that most would argue he does not deserve. And following the defeat of the Yahtzee forces and the end of the Yahtzee occupation of Europe, the US became home to a great number of these war criminal refugees. In 2006, a 600-page report was released by the Office of Special Investigations entitled "Striving for Accountability in the Aftermath of the Holocaust." Initially, the report was heavily redacted, and the Justice Department did their best to keep the report a secret. But 4 years later, in 2010, the lid was blown off and the report was fully released. The report documents the CIA's pursuit of Yahtzee war criminals' use of and collaboration with Yahtzees for post-war intelligence purposes, as well as how America became a safe haven for Yahtzees. Perhaps you've heard of Operation Paperclip, a secret United States intelligence program in which more than 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians, many of whom were not only members but leaders of the Yahtzee Party, were taken from former Yahtzee Germany to the United States for government employment between 1945 and 1959. In addition to being recruited by the U.S. government following the war, many Yahtzee soldiers had emigrated to the U.S. and fabricated stories about their roles and involvement during the European occupation and genocide, predominantly of but not limited to people of Jewish heritage. And in a number of cases, the CIA actively scrubbed their files in order to ensure they wouldn't encounter any problems at the INS, or Immigration and Naturalization Service. It wasn't until 1979 that the first wave of Yahtzee hunting began in earnest, following media reports which brought these under-the-radar Yahtzees to the attention of the general public and to the interest of Congress. These revelations led to the creation of a Yahtzee hunting unit within the Justice Department, which would seek out, prosecute, and/or deport those found hiding out in the U.S. To be clear, it took more than 20 years to expose this scheme, and it was only a little more than 40 years ago that this all began to happen. I have linked some articles in the description, including several sources and one particularly interesting article that chronicles a specific case in which a Yahtzee who lied his way through customs, aided by the CIA, was eventually found out and brought to justice in 1992. Morality and the fictionalization of a historic tragedy. In Apt Pupil, King uses one of the world's most egregious atrocities as a core part of the story, and while I was subjecting myself to the story for a second time, I wondered what it must be like for a survivor of the Holocaust to read such a story. What emotions, thoughts, and feelings would it elicit? And further still, would they feel that King's use and fictionalization of this horrific tragedy was immoral or perhaps exploitative? Apt Pupil is, of course, not the only story ever told that has used or explored controversial, tragic, real-world events as a basis for fictional storytelling. Not in the slightest. Immediate examples that come to mind are the Kubrick film Full Metal Jacket or the Coppola film Apocalypse Now, both of which involve the Vietnam War, or other cases which involve Yahtzee Germany and the Holocaust, like Guillermo del Toro's The Strain, which begs the question, what if Yahtzees but also vampires? And Tarantino's Inglourious Bastards, which begs the question, what if Yahtzees but also Brad Pitt? Hell, even Forrest Gump and Titanic capitalized on this falsification of historical record. The most recent example that is of direct relevance to the topic of discussion relative to Apt Pupil is the Amazon Prime show Hunters. The show is about a team of Yahtzee hunters in the 1970s who discover a network of hundreds of fugitive Yahtzees hiding out in New York City and conspiring to create a Fourth Reich in the United States. The series bills itself as being based on true events, but it's at best very loosely based on true events. It's a comic book style interpretation of the events it purports to be based on, but that's not to say it isn't an entertaining show, which is essentially the crux of this circle I can't manage to square. If that is a saying or makes any sense, I'm not sure. What must it feel like as a survivor of a world-altering, inconceivably devastating event, to know that the story, your history, your trauma is being adapted, transposed, and artistically altered for entertainment purposes? Survivors of both the Vietnam War and the Yahtzee occupation are still alive. It's hard to put myself in their shoes and imagine how it would make me feel, how I would react to seeing these stories and films profit off of and take advantage of what, to me, was the most traumatic, unconscionable event of my lifetime. And what does it imply that we as consumers continue to enjoy these fictional representations of atrocity? That those stories which capitalize on, manipulate, and, let's be honest, exploit actual instances of heinous adversity and reshape historical record have become a mainstay in our diet of American media. True crime dramas, war movies, serial killer biopics, so much of media reimagining the stories of real people, of communities, of entire cultures for public consumption, for profit, for spectacle. Have they made a Sandy Hook movie yet? Why not? How about a Pulse nightclub novella, Mr. King? When should we expect the Ethan Crumbley feature-length film? Too soon? What's the statute of limitations on devastating tragedies? When does it become okay to exploit these things, and why do we feel the need to do it at all? All I'm saying is for every fictionalization of a recent or even a not-so-recent tragedy, there is potentially a human being who is still here. Someone who lived through that tragedy, or lost someone they loved as a result of it, or had their entire world upended by it. And when I put myself in their shoes, it seems kind of sick to spit shine it and sell it to Hollywood. Is it immoral to fictionalize the Holocaust? I don't know, but it sure seems, at the very least, kind of shitty. To be clear, I think Apt Pupil is an incredible, unique, and upsetting story. It's effective. And I've enjoyed a number of historical fiction stories, movies, and shows, but I wasn't there for any of them. It's never been my story, and I can't help but wonder what it would feel like to me, what it would do to me if it were. This isn't intended to be a condemnation of these stories or the people who write them. It's just something that crossed my mind while writing, and I figured I'd throw it out there as it seemed like a worthwhile consideration. But if I could play devil's advocate for a moment, I want to at the very least applaud King for his approach with Apt Pupil. The story is a deeply disturbing read. Both of the main characters are detestable monsters who only grow exceedingly more loathsome over the course of the story. So in that sense, I feel like King got it right. We are never encouraged to cheer them on. We are never asked to see their softer, more human side. There is no glorification of their misdeeds, but rather King exposes the characters for what they are early on and asks us to revel in their gradual, mutually assured destruction. We're given an opportunity to watch the slow revenge of time and consequence come calling in a way that, while perhaps not entirely satisfactory, feels just and well-earned. In other words, if you're going to exploit a tragedy on a massive scale for fiction's sake, this might be the best approach and angle from which to do so, but hey, what do I know? Final thoughts. Apt Pupil is an intriguing, unique, frozen teleprompter it's not moving. Apt Pupil is an intriguing, unique, and disturbing story, and for that reason, I enjoy it. It feels more like a Bachman book than a King story, honestly, one that peers into a dark part of history and into the darkness that resides within men. And while he doesn't give us a protagonist to root for, he does give us a conclusion that feels appropriate for both of the story's central villains. Next week, I'll be taking a look at the 1998 feature-length film adaptation of Apt Pupil. I somehow haven't seen this movie before, so I'm looking forward to it, even though that is never a good idea. Just a hopeless optimist, I guess. New videos drop on this channel every Saturday at 10 a.m., so lick the bell with your mouth finger to get notifications. Okay, goodbye. Be sure to click like and subscribe to the channel for my continued analysis of all things Stephen King, pretty please with blood and guts on top. My name is Mr. Doyle. My name is Mr. Doyle, and this has been a great undertaking.